Daniel Acheampong is very much his own man, and I'm grateful to say my new friend. He was most recently an entrepreneur in residence at MIT designX, where he co-founded a marketplace platform. Daniel and I share a relationship to the Kennedy School because that's where he earned his degree in public administration. His connection to his family, especially his dad and mom, are dynamic to how he lives and what he believes. And their influence, in great part, has made him the man he is today. Enjoy. Welcome, Daniel.
Oh, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here, Miss Janice.
Oh my goodness, the honor is mine. And while I do want to learn about your early years, because I'm really intrigued with how you got to be who you are, let's start with the work you're doing right now. Give us a short explanation of what Visible Hands VC is and how did it start?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just an incredible journey. But what we're building at Visible Hands is that we're a venture capital firm with an accelerator. But our focus is that we want to identify incredibly talented women and folks of color who are building venture-backable technology companies. And we thought about this in a really, really detailed way, and we said, if women and racial minorities make up about 70% of the US population, why is it that they will receive less than 10% of investment dollars, right? And the math doesn't make sense. And also is a huge missed opportunity for the country, for our cities, for economic growth, for our GDP. So we wanted to do something about it. And for me, there are also personal elements to it that we can get into it later in the conversation. But just thinking about it on a macroeconomic level, but also to the micro level, the changes that we can make in our community could be incredibly impactful when we back and support diverse founders.
Well, we can get into it right now
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
personally, I'm nodding in agreement. I'm not just saying
Mhm.
that I'm listening. A large percentage of our family listening right now are female, and many of our listeners are people of color. So you
Yes.
shared these statistics around the 75% of the population
Yeah.
receiving less than 10% of VC
Yeah.
funding. Go ahead and dive in deeper right now on why you believe this is the case. And you know what, Daniel, let's talk about how you and others are working to provide more opportunities to address this. We're not just going to share the challenge, we're going to share the solution.
Yeah. Yeah. I can take a step back even to pull the thread of also the personal element of why this is important to me.
Yes.
So, I was born in Ghana and I came to the US as a kid. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and New York is a special place for me, Brooklyn. My dad himself was an entrepreneur. So I saw the hustle, the work that it takes to be an entrepreneur. And when he came to this country, for him, and I asked him, I was like, he and I were having a conversation the other day about why he decided to make the step to come to the US. And his answer was that so that my kids could have a better education. That for him, education was opportunity. So with my dad, I mean, it doesn't matter what happens in the world. If you are sitting with a book in your hand, he will encourage you to do more of it. So my parents, for me, show the importance of access to information, access to education, and access to resources. So from Brooklyn, I was very, very fortunate to have gotten into college through the Posse Foundation. And that Posse Foundation is an incredible scholarship program that identify kids from all around the country who have the skills, that they're doing incredible work in their communities, but a lot of these kids can't necessarily afford to go to colleges. So what Posse does is that it brings the students together as a cohort, right? That you go to campus not just by yourself, but you have 9 other people with you that is your family, your brothers and sisters to go through the experience with. And I bring Posse up because it's connected to some of the model that we took to influence Visible Hands. So, throughout that experience, it was just amazing to see when you go through an experience with a group of people that the network, the bond, the support system becomes really effective to push you through the journey. And through Posse, I was recruited to go work at Goldman Sachs. I had a great experience there, worked in asset management, incredible mentors. And it was for me this first exposure to see how, something as important as as small as interest rates can have an influence on the price of coffee, right? And we're seeing where right now we are at a historical place of interest rates and inflation. And it was just a great learning experience at Goldman, and also seeing how money moves in the world. And was later.
Well,
Mhm.
let me jump in there because you're
Yeah,
talking about seeing how money moves in the world. The U.S.
yeah,
debt ceiling, the U.S. debt ceiling is in front of the news and a lot of people's minds across the
yeah.
globe. Do you care to talk about that a little bit with respect to VC and what's frustrating you the most about how venture funding is being handled around that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what's happening right now, there, there's a fundamental part of it is that when you owe people money, you have to pay them, right? And that's the fundamental basis of lending. And as the debt ceiling conversation is happening right now, I think that's something that the government fundamentally needs to do, pay borrowers, pay people that they're borrowing money from. So the debt ceiling too, also there's an economic impact that if we don't meet these obligations and we don't come up with a clear solution for it, the ramification in people getting access to make payroll, actually being able to make sure that the government functions, the how is going to impact the market. And right now, even in the stock market, we're seeing the volatility, the movement, and the frustration that's happening there because there's uncertainty in the system right now. So the debt ceiling is an important thing for the government to figure out, but also it's connected to every layer of our society of money and how money moves in the system. So on the venture side, Ms. Janice, is that, venture, how it works is that you get money from someone who believes, say, hey, I believe you can use this capital to go invest in ideas and founders and businesses who can create value and expand that value. And when the value is expanded, that money could also be, given back to whoever gave it to you in multiple. So when there's uncertainty in the environment, it creates concern that if I give money to someone, is it actually going to have an impact? Are things actually going to move forward? So right now there's uncertainty in the government right now that's impacting the business cycle that needs to be figured out. And I got that incredible learning from a place like Goldman Sachs to
Mhm.
understand how the world and the market moves. Now from Goldman, go ahead.
I was going to ask you,
Uh-huh.
but I want to hear what you're saying because I was moving. I want to stay where you are right
Yeah.
now. More to say.
Yeah. Yeah, and from my time at Goldman, I was recruited to a private equity firm called Summit Partners, also an incredible place that I learned. And, when private equity is part of the spectrum of investing. And I remember just taking a step back and saying, wow, these are huge pools of capital that's out here in the investment world. But where is all that money going? Right? You take your head up and you say, if I look at the early stages from friends and family investing, and I can go into detail on all of this, to pre-seed to seed, all the way to the public market, the stock market, all the money that's being invested, most of that money, from when we look at the data, is going to men, and mostly white men. So it got me frustrated. And I said, wait, I have 3 sisters. And if any one of my sisters were to go out and try to build a company, the chances of them becoming successful become significantly diminished by virtue of gender and color. And that's what the stats is telling us. And that doesn't make sense. So my partners and I, we said, look, we got to do something about this. And we looked at the spectrum of venture, of investing, and said, well, it's hard to just come in and plug in random spots if we don't actually address the top of the funnel, the beginning stages. We have to expand that top of the funnel where we have more diverse founders building companies. So we built out Visible Hands as that platform, as that early stage investment firm where we identify great diverse founders who are building these venture scalable technology companies, and we support them not only with money, but with community, with mentorship and specific resources about what they're building.
So let's stay here a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Your data informs the story. Data is
Absolutely.
not the story. This is the conversation I was just having last evening at a
That's right.
keynote I gave, and it's a conversation that I consistently give. And I'm proud to be called the data queen in my industry. Data is not the story. It
That's right.
informs the story. Your data says 70% of the US population is made up of women and people of color, and 10% of VC funding is provided to these people. That's the data. Then is the story Daniel, that there are systemic issues in the established VC world that prevent women and people of color from improving their lot at a faster rate or at a broader spectrum?
I think, there are inherent biases in decision making, right? And when we even look at the decision makers in venture, the decision makers in business, that often is men and often is white men. So in venture, looking at the data as well, Ms. Janice, here is that the managing directors or the people who are actually making decisions on where the money is going, again, it's less than 10% of that are black men or diverse investors. So then the decision making then also is not diverse. And there's a bias, I think there's a biasness that goes on, right? In the sense of, if you see a certain framework of what success looks like that hasn't included a certain group of people, the assumption is that that is the only framework that works. So we want to challenge that. And in fact, we believe, and that's part of the reason why the name, for Visible Hands came forward, was that, if we look at the economic model of that everybody is included in this process, actually the data shows that not everybody is included, so that when we include it, that's when we begin to truly push our economy, to push our country to a place where we're maximizing the talent, the skills, and the resources of everybody.
So money, let's think about it this way. Numbers are black and white, but money isn't.
I think numbers are black and white, money is green, but the decision
well
makers,
in the USA, but it's purple, it's blue, it's
sure,
gold, it's
that's
stones, right. So building off of that and those last couple of conversations we just had, what challenges, Daniel, do you foresee in the venture capital landscape going forward, especially when it comes to fostering DE&I?
Yeah. Well, I'll say I'm actually really excited about the future of venture, because right now we're seeing so many diverse investors and diverse founders who are coming into the fold. And, a lot of them are my friends, we're peers, and we're sharing deals, we're sharing resources together. So that gets me really excited that not only is it more diverse founders coming into the fold, but it's also really collaborative. So, I think there will always be challenges, but I'm so optimistic about where it's headed.
Yeah, one of the things I shared last evening, I mentioned the keynote, is that never before has there been as rich a time for resourcing and inclusiveness around, economic circumstances. And, the audience was and these are very educated and established executives, and they kind of leaned back. First of all, that I, who identify as Black and female, is saying this, and secondly, that I'm saying it at this time of such disruption, in the world. And I encourage that disruption is a good thing. Discordance may not be. but that we are at a really good time because, you know, it's when we are in the worst of times that we seek for the best of times. And so
That's right.
innovation and thoughtfulness occurs differently than it has. When you're looking at traits in founders, what are you
Yeah,
considering about them in working with them? And let me just put it why I'm asking you this.
yeah.
48 hours ago, I got back from Egypt, and I stopped in Qatar naturally, right? And, you know, it was a combination of business and attending a wedding. And these are seriously moneyed people who
Mm-hmm.
look more like you and I do than they look like the people making the decisions at Goldman Sachs would have looked like, you know,
Mm,
20 years ago. Um, so I guess I'm saying that whether it's tech driven, purpose driven, or just, you know, people are becoming more humane despite what we see in a
mm-hmm.
political environment. Um, is there is there a different appreciation, or are we just running out of customers who are white men? What's going on? What are the traits you're looking for in founders today?
Yeah, for me, the I have a mental model about who I look for to invest in. The first one is that I want to see that the person has a deep understanding of about the problem. In fact, I will venture to say that an idea in itself, just an idea, the value is zero. And this could be a hot topic, and people might challenge me on it, but I really do. The idea is worth zero.
Right.
The value of the idea comes in the execution, right? So to execute, there has to be a deep work and understanding of what is the problem that I'm solving. And I think sometimes people run to solution before truly understanding the problem. So the first thing I look for in a founder is, do you deeply understand the problem? Have you spent enough time with the people you say you're going to solve it for? Then the second thing is that to understand the problem, then what is the customer validation process that you have gone through to show that there's a willingness to try the thing, or there's a willingness to buy the thing that you want to serve or provide? And then lastly, for me, is that, has this person also really gone through the process of putting together a strong team? Because you have to be able to identify what are the weak points, what are the areas that I'm just not good at, to bring the people along with it to ensure that we have a strong team to execute. So those are key points of my mental model. And then there are different parts about the product in itself. But when I really dive deeper is the person, the execution, and also having a clear understanding of the customer.
So that's brilliant, and none of it had
Mm-hmm.
color on it.
Mm-hmm.
Are there companies in your portfolio that you're able to
Mm-hmm.
talk about, that you're excited about around those same
Yeah.
principles?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can go through a list, but the one of the companies that immediately came to mind is that it's a company founded by Black women who have two MIT computer science PhD students and two Wharton MBAs.
Mm.
And when I first met them and began to learn about what they were building, it surprised me, Ms. Janice, that people wouldn't give them $30,000. And I was like, wait, let's pause right there. If we were to say we have four people who are two MIT computer science PhD students in computer vision and two Wharton MBAs, have background in Amazon and all these things, and they're building a computer vision product, would you be willing to support them if we didn't know that they were either women or Black? And the chances are it will mostly be yes. But just the challenge of them raising $30,000 surprised me. So we were one of the first institutional investors in them, and the company is called Parfait.
Mm-hmm.
There is a really incredible model where they're leveraging computer vision to support people to purchase customized wigs. And again, I have three sisters, so I know the cash flow that comes from wigs. right? And yeah, that's
Not
right.
just the cash flow, Daniel, but the flow.
The flow. That's right. That's right. It's beautiful. So, when I met, this is so brilliant that we're using deep tech to to address a need that has incredible cash flow. So when we back them, I mean, they're doing so well that they raised $5 million with Upfront Ventures and Serena Williams and just incredible ventures who came in to close out that $5 million round. But just those things, like, why did it take so long?
And 5 million, may I say, no, I'm not going to say it. I'm going to suppose it, since this isn't my area of expertise. May I suppose that while 5 million sounds incredible beyond 30,000, and one would ask, why were they only asking 30,000? Was that a smart thing as well? Which is a separate question. The supposition here is that 5 million was a nothing compared to the actual value of the industry they're interested in. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Huge.
And it's an industry where not only does it expand beyond women of color, because trust me, I go to Beverly Hills and the majority of women getting done ain't Black. And the women who are getting hair aren't Black, and they throw theirs away more quickly than Black women do as well, so they buy more. But it also is an industry where men are getting into it now as well.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So it was short-sighted about the potential of what they're doing, where if these women are enabling you to use some type of virtuosity or technology to personalize or customize wigs, then they are doing something that will enter into the healthcare arena as well.
Spot on.
It's a beauty and health industry, and they are also doing it in a way where people became more comfortable / dependent and expectant on the ability to shop from home during these last 2+ years that we've all
right.
So that's my piece for them, and I don't know them.
I feel like you're on our investment committee. I mean, that was it, like that. The beachhead market, certainly identifying people, women who are using wigs, but if we think about the potential growth of the market, it's not just beauty, it's healthcare. And so the expansion was for us, it made a lot of sense. And just backing also experts who are able to go out and execute on this. So that our portfolio companies those are the examples where incredible background, they're executing and identifying, that there's specific things that we can support them to go out and build.
Yeah. And, Daniel, as you stated earlier, I'll quote you, a great idea does not necessarily a business make.
That's right.
What trends or emerging technologies are you particularly excited about getting involved with?
Yeah. So for me, there's I look at our portfolio, even though we're industry agnostic, there are a couple of verticals that we're spending time in, such as B2B SaaS, fintech, health tech, some creative tools. And of course, right now, AI it will become the embedded infrastructure across, almost every startup. The industries, also coming from my finance background, is that I think fintech is really fascinating. In fact, in a past few months, we've seen 3 major banks in the US go under. All right. And this shows that there's a lot of disruption that needs to be had within the financial industry. So, fintech, I think, is going to continuously be an interesting landscape. And then when I think about that in the context of the unbanked and the underbanked, that makes up about a quarter of the US population. So then how could we use tech and innovative ways to support the unbanked and underbanked? Because that is a pretty huge population.
And when you speak to a quarter of that population being unbanked or underbanked, we typically think about within the current way banking is occurring. fintech is
Exactly.
bigger. Fintech is bigger, I think, Daniel, than how we currently bank. I serve on the Women's Leadership Board at housed out of Harvard, and
Mm,
maybe 3 4 years ago, it was prior to COVID, we had some young women students who were presenting their businesses to us. And the majority of them were fintech businesses. And one was
yeah.
so simple, and simple doesn't always mean easy, but
Yeah.
one was so simple. It was the idea of, I'm getting to the idea of how banking can evolve or spin off as well. And I sat there thinking, this is pod banking. You know,
Mm,
where all she was interested in doing was creating a virtual or a device, app
mm-hmm.
driven opportunity for people who work in this country but have financial needs back home. The
Mm,
majority, the majority in the number of them, talking scale of customers now, were people who earn under
yeah.
$100,000. The
Mm,
majority earn under 60,000, I think, and so that's a particular banking dynamic that
yeah.
if we can remove the need for people to process, and it can become an easy solution for them to bank back and forth home, uh,
Yes.
then not only is it good for the US because that becomes money that is identified and taxed, it
Yeah.
also is good for back home because now you've got people who have the education and the financial ability to take care of people who don't have it, wherever back home is. And
Yes.
I thought that was a brilliant technology. By the way, she's doing
Yes.
quite well with it, even though she hasn't, fully branded it forward. It was an idea for her community. It
Yeah.
could be explosive as a pod bank. This is all we
Yeah.
do. We don't support your real estate needs. We
Yeah.
don't support your investment portfolio. Or we're not a commercially driven bank per se,
Yeah.
but we're going to support the individual who has a need to do. And I thought that is so hot. That's so spot on because the cost associated with
Yeah.
legacy traditional banking is people heavy, isn't it?
That's spot on. In fact, as you're saying, I wonder if you're talking about one of our portfolio companies
I won't
because,
say if I am because it was confidential, but go ahead
yeah,
with it because.
because we invested in a company from by a Harvard student. It's called Tang app. And Tang, so Rebecca, who's the founder, is a really good friend of mine. She and I we were both at Harvard together, and I just saw how well she was executing and all that. But to your point, it was a similar model where exactly that the remittance fees are so expensive, and her customer base focus is starting from the Philippines, but it costs about one month out of 12 months fees to send money back home. So 1/12 of the money you make, just imagine in the US, you look at your salary and it's 1/12 is going to go to fees. That's almost robbery. So she came up with this model where she said, we're going to create an international model like Venmo and make it very simple for people to transmit money back home, and also do it at a fee that actually makes sense, really low cost. And she's just crushing it. So those are some of the ideas that I get really excited about fintech, that changing the way that we not only move money, but that also how we support communities who are, who need this new layer or this different way of thinking to help them grow their businesses, take care of their families, and
And
also
by the way, some of those communities are right here in the US from where you're
that's
sitting,
right.
you
That's
know.
right.
So listen, with the advantages of working with your organization, those founders and entrepreneurs who are interested in learning more or applying to one of your accelerators,
Yeah.
what does the process look like for them?
Yeah. So, we keep our process pretty simple. Is an application process on the front end, and then there's an interview. And then from that interview, we make our final decisions. But but the framework of how we're making the decisions are some of the things that I mentioned is someone who really have a deep understanding about the problem, that they have a clear customer validation process, they have a compelling product that solves a specific pain point, and then they also have a clear go-to-market strategy of how they're going to solve it. So those, those four things where we hone in on. And, we have actually our application that's going to close for our third cohort on May 29th. So, I encourage people to apply, but I'm always open to speaking with entrepreneurs. I'm speaking with founders all the time.
And the band of trust they may believe, because every process an entrepreneur goes through in seeking
Yes.
funding is one that can be very draining personally, as well
Yes.
as disappointing to the business. Is the band of trust that you make to them, that the decisioners are going to understand them culturally and not read ill messages from signs. Let me tell you what I'm talking about. I was speaking with a banker associated to a very large bank,
Yeah.
and he was sharing how one of his teams had interviewed this person. They're doing very well now, who they turned down. Okay. And I said, but you guys read him wrong, because one of the things you said to me was it was a man. He was so uncertain and slow in his answers. You're traditionally talking to people who have rehearsed and had coaches on making their pitches. When you're talking to a Black man from the South, he may not, if he's not gone through a traditional business school, be better thoughtful and truthful when he's speaking from a slower pace than someone who's fitting it out because they're very well rehearsed.
That's right.
Being well rehearsed versus being thoughtful and slow to respond is not always the best indicator of the value of the product or service somebody is putting forward. It may be a cultural difference. I know when I was growing up, Daniel, we were taught it was disrespectful for a child to look a grown-up in the eye. Later, I learned that that was read as being not trustworthy if you couldn't look someone in the eye. So that band of trust you offer people who are coming in to pitch for VC funding, does it include that you are going to take into account their cultural presentation may be an impact to how they're saying it, but not necessarily to what they're going to deliver to market, or better yet, an asset to what they delivered?
Wow, I think that is so spot on, because when we first went through our first and second cohort, we realized that we also needed to check ourselves, right? And we're so thoughtful about that, because someone could be a really good writer in the application, but it doesn't mean they're going to deliver well in an interview. Or it could be vice versa, not a good writer, but excellent in pitching. So, we really took those things into consideration, that, well, how do we ensure that we're checking our biases from these evaluation standpoints? But that's why the framework that we established has allowed us to be like hone in on the frameworks, and just never, and we tell our team this, that don't make assumptions. That if you have a question, if there's something that you're not clear about, let's reach out to the founder and have a conversation with them. But we're not going to make an assumption about the way they speak or the way that they wrote. We're not going to make assumptions. Just truly reach out to get a sense of what they're building and who they are as a person. So that is so spot on, that we really check ourselves on that.
Yeah, because if you had not seen Ted Turner nor known of his background, you would have thought that you were making a loan to an older Black man. Ted Turner spoke the way the man who raised him spoke. He did not speak the way his father spoke. And so if you were to listen to him, he may not sound like a good bet, but he did some dynamic things, in the world of business. All of that said, one does need to come prepared for some formality in the process. What does that look like? Many of the people listening to you right now will be VC seeking. What do they need to be ready for in that process?
Yeah, I'm gonna connect it to just the recent point that we just made, Miss Janice, about even the about Turner. There was a founder that I came across, and this was in the pitch competition, and he had a speech impediment, and when he was pitching, it took him longer time to present. But I got to tell you, he was the most prepared out of anyone who pitched, incredibly prepared. And he came from this deep medical background. He understood every aspect of what he was trying to build. And in the end, he won the pitch competition at $50,000. And those are some of the things that we realized we can't use arbitrary things to make decisions, but we have to see the person for who they are and respect their own excellence. So, to the point, the question that you just asked is preparation. For me, when I meet a founder, I really dive deep into the problem. And once I get a sense of that they don't understand, I mean, and you can tell, right? When you meet someone who truly understand what they're building, and when you ask them, like, so who's the customer? And they don't say, oh, I shared this with my cousins and some friends and my sisters. Like, that's not your customer. But people who say, I have actually gone out and I spoke with X amount of people. They've given me these insights, and from these insights, we were able to run these tests, and it didn't work, but then we went back and tried to explore a little bit more. I mean, that is incredible level of research and preparation that for me gives comfort. And as an investor, the money is not my money. I have a responsibility to folks who are entrusting me and my partners to make a decision that believe will create value in the businesses, the companies that we're investing in. So then I need to ensure that the companies and the founders that I'm backing are really good at what they say they're going to do, and that they're going to do it well, because I have to report it back to my investors. And I give founders that perspective of that, this is collaborative work, and we have to do this together. And to do this, I also need to trust you. You need to trust me. And a lot of my trust will come from level of preparation and execution.
So, Daniel, beyond understanding the product and, necessarily understanding the market,
Yeah.
do you find any particular areas from underrepresented entrepreneurs who are seeking funding that they need support or they need education to prior to coming in and making that ultimate pitch? Are there things they need to know that may be different based on coming from an underrepresented community?
Yeah, I would say this, that I really think sometimes, and when we look at the data, we also see this, that sometimes diverse founders come in and they don't ask enough. All right, that they almost under ask, and they're really good at selling. It's like, ask for more. You deserve more. Ask what your business needs. So I'll encourage underrepresented founders that when you are in the room, you belong in the room. Like, you are at the table, speak and let your voice be heard. So ask for what you need. And this is, something that there's a process I had to go through myself. Because, the point that you made growing up, that, looking at someone in the eye could be seen as a sign of disrespect. I remember growing up, for me, when an adult was talking, you didn't speak because the adult was talking. And when I started my career at Goldman, I was in a conference room with some of my peers. We were all analysts. And a friend of mine was challenging managing directors in the conference room. And I was like, wait, what? Like, he's challenging the boss. I had not seen anything like that before. And I was just so afraid to speak my mind. So those experiences made me realize that, yes, I do have a voice. I could speak. I could challenge it. I need to come prepared and know that, if I have these points, say the points. There's a line that I heard from from a song that closed mouths don't get fed.
Mhm.
And that's true. So, through those experiences, it gave me this this encouragement that I have to ask for what I need and not be afraid of it. Because the worst that you can hear is a no. And that's okay. You're still going to be alive.
You
You're
leave
gonna
out
still
no less than you walked in with a no.
exactly. So go ask and know that you belong in a room.
Yeah, because when you're fully prepared, you can be fully present. And I
That's
think
right.
we're accustomed to not being welcome, so we don't bring all of ourselves into the room. I'm not suggesting everything you should bring in there either. Okay, leave some of it up. But I do think that when you are prepared, you can have confidence that you can be fully present. And when you talk
Yeah.
about sometimes people from underrepresented communities don't ask enough, enough can be from two places. Enough can be, as when I asked, they only asked 30,000. Was that really smart? You know
Mm,
what then? But it can also be asking the questions you need so that, we teach people, I'm in the employment business, and we
mm,
teach people, don't be the only one being interviewed in that conversation.
that's right.
We believe we put you in the right place in front of the right person, but you interview them as well to make
Spot on.
sure. And I would wonder if you might give that same advice to people who are seeking funding.
Spot on. I mean, when you're receiving funding from investor, from anyone, that it's a bond, is a connection and a commitment. And from our side of the business is a long-term commitment. In many cases, 5, 7, 10 plus years. So
And it does open the veil to continued inspection and continued voice to how you're building your business as well, does it
exactly.
not?
Exactly. It's continuing and it's continuous. So, for me, the companies that we've invested in, I get updates from the companies and I follow up and I reach out. There's a level of that I also need to understand what's happening with the business. So there's a level of scrutiny that comes with the capital transaction. So it's not just a one-way process that when you're in that conference room, you should be interviewing the VC as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk about this the same way as dating, right? Before you get married to anyone, you want to truly understand who they are. Like you want to date them, you want to get a sense of personality. What do they care about? What are some of the things that they don't like? The things that you like, and all this, you have to experience that. So, and that's investing. That's building a company. And you have to go through the process of asking them the tough questions. That, how many companies have you invested in? What's the relationship been like with those companies? How have you supported them? What are some of the things that you look for in the founder to ensure that is very specific in helping them grow? Like just ask the tough questions. And you have to feel comfortable in those tough questions because again, it is a marriage, and that
And
marriage is a long time.
do you agree that it would be important or at minimum permissible to ask during that process
Mhm.
what they find lacking in you or where are their concerns about what you
Mm,
discussed? I mean,
yeah.
that opens you up to actually hear perhaps some harsh truths, but it also can paint a clearer picture about how you're leaving that room.
Hmm. Yeah. In fact, for our core positions, when we make the investments, we also have a risk section in our investment memo. And those are hard truths that you want to know as a builder, right? That what are my blind spots? Everyone has a blind spot. Every company has a blind spot. It doesn't matter how big or small they are. So asking an objective perspective, it's actually really, really helpful. And you want to walk out of those rooms to understand that are they actually doing a thoughtful analysis to understand your blind spots and be helpful to help you go through those blind spots. And it's a relationship. It's not just a transaction. And when you see it from the perspective of a relationship, I think it becomes a really beautiful partnership to move things forward.
Oh, I just love what you're saying here, and I think it's going to be
Hmm.
so helpful to so many who are listening.
Hmm.
Um, we talked about your company and your industry. Let's talk about you. Uh, I want to get into your education a little bit. I mean, you've mentioned
Yeah,
before that you believe in taking a multidisciplinary road to learning. Talk a little bit
yeah,
about what that means.
yeah. I feel so fortunate to have had um, incredible people in my life who encouraged my curiosity. Um, from my math teacher in high school, Mr. Pachi, who saw that I was interested in math. So he forced me to be on a team called the Fed Challenge Team. And the Fed Challenge Team is that it basically bring high school kids to the Federal Reserve and say, hey, come up with a thesis about what's happening in the economy and pitch it to leaders at the Federal Reserve. And I remember when Mr. Pachi told me this, I was that high school student, I was all about basketball. And I was like, Mr. Pachi, I got basketball games going on. I'm not going to join this. And he came to me and he was like, Daniel, if you don't join this, I'm going to have you get kicked off the basketball team. And
Oh,
there's always that teacher, right? Those individuals in the school who have the authority to say something like that and you believe
mhm,
it.
mhm.
Mr. Pachi was one of them. So I was like, all right, Mr. Pachi, well, why don't we come up with a deal that I'll come to these meetings like once a week and see how that goes. Changed my life. I
Mhm,
got,
mhm.
I mean, I began to learn about the economy, about the world. And I was, in the 10th or 11th grade. And I was like, wait, this is super fascinating that if the Fed Reserve moves this number, it releases billions of dollars that
Mhm.
trickles into a bank, and then these banks create a process that people are able to borrow money, and that the money impacts businesses. And it's just the connected.
New life, right? New light, new life.
Absolutely. It just created these like connected pieces, like the synapses were just going all over the place. And I was like, oh man, this is fascinating. And I started college in 2007. So in 2006 was when, in high school, I began doing these things. So our thesis was that the prices in the housing market was really high and that nothing goes up forever, right? So we went to the Federal Reserve and made this pitch and we lost. And in 2007, I'm about to start college and a crisis happened. The financial, the housing crisis, financial market starts tanking. And I remember running down the hallway to Mr. Pachi's office, like, Mr. Pachi, that was our thesis. We were right. And it's just like opened my mind that this is not just a random thing. This is real. So
Mhm.
I really took it seriously that I wanted to major in economics. So I went to Brandeis, majored in economics and politics because I saw how the connectedness of that is, right. The Federal Reserve, even though is an entity that makes the monetary decisions, it responds to Congress. Congress have to give a lot of the approvals on and also supporting in the appointments of who the Fed chair is.
Right.
So it's all connected. So for me, the multidisciplinary learning is that if I understand one, it helps me understand the other, and it creates a cyclical process. And the same thing that I had a teacher also in high school, Miss Yutkov, who every summer I went to play basketball, and similarly she was like, Daniel, what are you doing for the summer? And I said, I go and play basketball. I do all these camps. And she was like, what if you this summer you try this different camp? It's called Seeds of Peace. And you go and explore and meet other kids from different countries. I get to this camp, Miss Janice, and one of those moments that also just shocks you. My first day there, I'm about 14, 15 years old. I get to this camp, and a group of kids who were Palestinians were yelling at another group of kids who were Israelis, and they were yelling back and forth. And one is saying, "You're a terrorist." The other is saying that we're freedom fighters. And they were just like, and I'm a 14, 15-year-old high school student, like, what is going on here? I've never heard of these things. I didn't know about global politics. And the camp idea was that if you bring kids from different cultures, different regions around the world, especially conflicting regions, and you foster a friendship and a collaboration. I mean, we were playing soccer at, we throughout the whole process, like we were playing soccer, playing games, swimming together, eating together. We lived in the same bunks. That if you bring kids together, it establishes at an early age the foundation of peace.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And I remember from that beginning all the way to the last day when we were going home, we were all hugging each other, and it was just tears going out, running through every kid's eyes that we don't want to leave. We want to stay here. And some of those folks are still some of my closest friends. And that changed my perspective about global politics. That's when I learned about what's happening in the world. So for me, multidisciplinary learning is critical to just the foundation of what's happening around us, right? Understanding our culture, our history. So I take that very, very seriously. And that led me to going to Harvard and Wharton to do my joint degree at the UPenn and also at the Kennedy School.
I love, love, love. By the way, the Women's Leadership Board, where I chair now, is housed out of the Kennedy School.
Mm.
When you talk about multidisciplinary learning, I think it's really showing the face of your belief to be a truth as we look at how we are establishing regulations and government around, not just at the national level, but international level around tech. How can we
Yes.
make laws about something we don't understand? And
Mm.
I think we're facing what could be a mini crisis with a great solution right now,
Mm.
in that so many of our elected officials don't understand tech. They may fear tech, and that can breed a want
Yeah.
for understanding, but it can also create positions based on lack of understanding as well.
Yes. Yes. I think, the point about I do think that a lot of our elected officials don't understand tech. And there are two things that can happen here, is that it can either create fear or it can create curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there should be an emphasis in more people tapping into their curiosity, right? To say, well, then how can we understand AI better? That what, in fact, at the simplest level, what is AI? Right. And then how do we use this concept of collecting large quantities of information, large language models, that creates multiple analysis to spit an output, right? And trying to understand how these things work makes you, I think, information makes us less fearful, and it actually leads to innovation and using curiosity to push that forward. So I so much agree with your point here that we need to encourage that curiosity to challenge this perspective of fear, because this tech is going to continue to change how we live, how we function, and it's better for us to understand it than to fear it. Because if
Yeah,
we
and it can
understand
be
it,
as
we can do
water.
something about
It
it.
Yeah, it can be as water for us. It
Yes,
can either drown us or sustain us and help us grow.
that's right.
But we've got to understand the law of water in order to,
Mm.
you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, same thing with, I mean, I love you use, the elements like fire,
Mm-hmm,
right? Fire burns and destroy, but you contain it
mm-hmm,
in a little, in
mm-hmm,
a little bottle. It
mm-hmm.
gives you light and direction.
Yeah, it's very, very important, I think. And when we talk about access to funding, access to education is important. And I believe
Yeah.
that they are
Mm.
so interrelated in how people are able to turn that great idea into a significant business. Um,
Yes.
Daniel, you've mentioned your mother in past interviews and how important she is to you. She was to you. And you
Yeah.
said that she did get to watch you walk at graduation. Share a few of the main lessons your mother
Oh,
taught you that are sticking with you in everyday life. Bring her
yeah.
to light.
Oh, I adore my parents, and my mom is, I get goosebumps, just talking about my mom. She passed away in 2011 when I was just graduating from college. But it's Abraham Lincoln has a quote that I love. He says, "All that I am and all that I ever will be, I am because of my mother."
Mhm.
And the just the sacrifices that she made to um just to push me and challenge me.
Did
I
your
remember,
mother did your mother immigrate as well?
yeah, she immigrated from Ghana to the US a few years after my dad. And my mom is one of those just strong Black woman. She did not take nonsense from anyone, and she held us to a really high standard. Then she also gave us this incredible level of freedom that you knew you couldn't break, right? So my mom would say this. She was like, "You could do whatever you want, but just don't disappoint me."
Mhm.
So it's like, all right, well then I'm gonna try not to. um, but it also gave me a lot of freedom to just learn things and try things and travel and explore. But I always knew that it's like, all right, I'm not gonna do this because my mom will get really upset, or I don't want to. Is this There's certain things that it gives me boundaries, but boundaries that still allowed me to explore. She was my biggest cheerleader. The a moment that comes to my mind that was very special, and I'll go to the point about graduation, was um, I had I was applying to I had just started my job at Goldman, and you got to go take a series exam, which is one of the exams that you Series 66 exam, which was one of the exams you actually need to pass to start the job as an analyst to do trading. And I mean, it was a tough process because at the time my mom was going through chemotherapy. So, I'll go spend time with her in a hospital and then try to go home and spend time to study and then go to training from morning to after, morning to, early evening, then go to the hospital. So it was like a cycle and really, really exhausting. But I just put my head down to try to study. And the day of the exam, I called her and I was like, "Mom, I'm really scared about this because I don't know if I'm going to pass." And she was like, "I stayed up all night praying for you so that angels will go with you to take this exam." And I, I almost cried in that moment. And I was like, "Mom, you should be taking care of yourself." But her care for me, um, it was, just only what a mother will do. And I walked into that exam and crushed it. But it was really with the confidence that I am walking in here with an army of angels, and like my mom is the general. And that, she's done that consistently in my life. And the graduation part was a tough one for me. I was super involved in my undergrad. I was president of our student union government, and just bringing a lot of people together. And I told the president of the university that I really want my mom to come to the graduation, but she's fragile. She might not be able to make it. And he was wonderful. He wanted to make all the accommodations to try to allow her to get there. But the day before, her body was just really weak and she couldn't make it. So she called me that day, and she was like, "I am so proud of you. I'm sorry that I can't be there." And the way that she said it, it felt as if it was the last moments that I was going to hear from her, but it was just her expressing that I was so proud of her for how much she continued to fight. Um, and she stayed on the phone with me throughout my graduation, even though she couldn't be there. Just an incredible woman, and she's taught me so much about my faith, about believing in God. My mom's way of saying "I love you" was "God be with you." That was her way of saying "I love you." So my favorite verse and I'm a man of faith. My favorite verse in the Bible that for me reinvigorates me every time is one that she would send me in the mornings. Is Isaiah 41:10, and it says, "Do not be afraid, for I am with you. And do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will help you, I'll strengthen you, and I'll uphold you with my victorious right hand." And that was her favorite quote.
Okay, we're gonna give
Yeah.
1 second for your mom.
Yeah.
Thank you for being brave and being loving and being caring, to share that. We've talked about a lot, and there's so much more I could talk with you about. Is there
Yeah.
anything in particular you'd love us to cover in this conversation that we've not yet?
This is so wonderful. If you don't mind, there's one more story that just comes to my mind that it was just a really wonderful moment. When I graduated from Harvard, I was hanging out with one of my really good friends, and he and I went for a long bike ride. And I graduated in the mix of COVID. So when he and I went for a long bike ride, we went to his neighborhood to hang out and grab pizza. And as we were about to grab pizza, not a lot of people were coming outside at the time because of COVID. But this friend, John, he's incredible. He began to just like get people outside and say, "Hey, my boy just graduated from Harvard. It's just a really big deal." And for me, I was just in the process of, I just went through this process. When you're in the process, you're just in the process of getting through school, right? But different people from the neighborhood came up to me. Two people particularly stood out. One was a young man, and he said, "Man, you're the first person that I know who have gone to Harvard." And that was like, I was like, "Man, this is really meaningful, that this is not for me."
Mhm.
And the other person was an older man in his 70s. His name is George.
Mhm.
And George approached me, and George said the same thing. So from a 70-year-old to a younger man, it's like they both said the same thing. And George said, "You're the first person that I'm meeting in my vicinity who have gone to Harvard." And George was just so proud of me.
Mhm.
So as we were eating pizza, George walked away, and he, was getting late, and he walked away. And then about 20 minutes later, he came out, and he was holding this necklace, right? And he gave this to me, and he said, "I want you to always keep this." And, I kind of know George from the name, but I don't really know him that well. And he was like, "This necklace is from his mother, who was really well known in the neighborhood, who just people adored her so much." He was like, when he walked inside, he felt this feeling for him to give me this necklace. And he said, "I am so proud of you." Miss Janice, he said it the same way that my mother said it.
Yeah.
And that was
Yeah.
a remarkable experience. And I've never taken this necklace off.
Is George Black?
He's Puerto Rican.
Puerto Rican. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, are you familiar with the story of the Georges along the railroads?
No, I'm not.
In the United States, and this is during my lifetime, many of the porters who worked the railroads along the East Coast, um, were the people who were able to bring us information in the Deep South and exchange things like the Ebony magazines, the Sepia
Mm-hmm.
magazines, the Jet magazines. They weren't sold in stores in the Deep South, Daniel, and so these Georges would bring those kinds of things to
Mm-hmm.
us in the South. Every porter was called George because they
Mm-hmm.
to their customers on the train, they weren't important enough to be distinguished by a name. To their customers in the community, they were so very valued because they were overlooked. They were able to
Mm-hmm.
bring us things that were not seen by others. So
Mm-hmm.
the paradox of that was strong. us. But yeah, they
Mm.
go, you Google it, Google the
I'll look
Georgia
into that.
report, and you will see
That's
that.
wonderful.
Before we go to four for four, let me share with you that I firmly believe you will provide funding to a company that will provide solutions to the very health challenge your mother suffered and transitioned.
Amen. Yes, that's right. That's right. It's one of my goals.
Okay, well, it's happening.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
happening. And so let's go four for four. Okay. I'm
Yeah.
going to ask you four questions and you're
Yeah.
going to give four answers to each question. There are
Mhm.
no wrong answers. Okay. Your first question is anybody who you would like to have at dinner, you get to have at dinner
Mm.
from history through current. Who's at your table?
Oh, so many people, but I will start with Abraham Lincoln. I mean, of course, there's Jesus, but I feel like Jesus, yes.
And why? Tell us why.
But I was Abraham Lincoln because Abraham Lincoln's personal story, I feel like is similar to mine with my mom. Right? He lost his mom when he was a young man and went through this journey of self-education. And he loved books. I mean, there was a moment where he borrowed a book from his neighbor farmer, and rain destroyed the book. He felt so bad that I believe he worked a whole summer as as a compensation for the book. So the self-education piece is something that I also admire because of, to the point about learning, and also the connection to losing his mom and just someone that he deeply adored.
Mm, mm, mm. And Jesus is there because
And Jesus is there. Um, I'm a man of faith, and I fundamentally believe that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I want wisdom. In fact, my core prayer is to ask for knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. So I would want to have that conversation with Jesus.
and who are the other two people sitting at the table with Jesus and Abraham Lincoln and you?
Oh, all right. So I'll choose someone present. Yeah, I would want to have Oprah at the table. Um, there's so many
Why?
questions that it's just I I think she's just so thoughtful in her search for understanding of who she is as a woman, as a creator, as an inspiration. I think when we think about the Soul Sundays or the book club, I think all of that is connected to a sense of curiosity of self, right? And I think when we have a deeper curiosity of self, it helps us to connect with others. And I see that in that exploration through the work that she's doing.
And she has very openly with us, transparently with us, shared her journey from fear to curiosity about
Yeah.
herself. And you talked earlier about the importance of, you know, appreciating curiosity and not
Yeah.
falling into fear. I
Yeah.
think that she would fit very well at your table. And I think also she has such a curation of wisdom and knowledge that has been
Mhm.
shared with her. We bring everything and everybody we've experienced with us to the table. Figuratively, I think she could
Yeah.
literally add a lot. I agree with you. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
And you
And
got
then
one more person.
the last the okay person uh I would I will this might be a random one, but I would want to have Whitney Houston at the table.
Mhm.
It's because of the this she was incredibly talented, and to for someone at her age, when that she was young, inspiring people with her music, but also as a strong Black woman who was performing and creating at a time where there was really not a lot of diversity in music, a lot of diversity in production and creation. And she just showed the world what, a strong Black woman can do on the stage, and do it to a level that we haven't seen. I want to have her at the table. That what is that confidence, that courage that pushed her to get on that stage so young? And then lastly with her also is that, how do you navigate the challenges of, when the world is coming down at you and you say that I need to pause and take care of myself. I think it's just there's a lot that she was dealing with, and there's a lot to ask from her, but to have the conversation of, how did you really go about the steps of saying I want to take care of myself and then be able to share with the world. And I think, I sometimes I feel bad for superstars and all the folks that, we put in the limelight, because they're also human beings, and understanding them as human beings first, given that humanity so that they can also be who they are to themselves before they give and share their talents with the world.
Yes, yes, yes. What a dinner. Wow.
Yeah.
What a dinner.
Yeah.
Daniel, let's go 2 for 4.
Yeah.
You talk about Whitney. That's a brilliant transition, because share with us now which 4 artists you're listening to, musical,
Yes.
and why.
All right, 4 artists I'm listening to. Okay, well, I talked about Whitney. My
Is she
friends
one you're listening to right now?
Right now, not necessarily Whitney, but I'm always listening to Andrea Bocelli
Yeah,
and Celine Dion.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I went to Andrea Bocelli's concert a couple of years ago, and it was literally watching mastery
Oh,
and excellence in real life.
you got
I
me ready to jump off of this sofa. I'm telling you. Oh
Yeah,
my goodness.
have you gone to his concert?
I'm
Oh
not to
my
be there
gosh.
live, and oh,
It was incredible. And we were fortunate to get close enough seats that I was like, oh my God, Andrea Bocelli. And he stands and perform with his voice, and he just lets it out. And that's incredible. So I listen to Andrea Bocelli all the time. Another artist though that I'm starting to spend more time is this is it's called, his name Fireboy DML. He's a Afrobeats artist, young and just really creative, and I think his music is fun. I'm trying to continue to explore more of my culture. Even though I was born in Ghana, I came here so young that I think there's still parts of my culture that I want to go back and explore and dive into, and I do that through music. So
do
Afrobeats.
you get to go to Ghana though? Have you visited frequently?
Yeah, I've gone back. I've gone back multiple times. Last time I was there was 2019, right before COVID, and I tried to go in 2021, but the day before my flight, Omicron caused the borders to shut down. So, but I do plan to go back again this year.
Okay, so I'm going to listen to Fireball Kelly. Listening for what you listen for. What will I be listening for?
So with Fireboy, he has the rhythm that he does sometimes is connected to the history of Afrobeats, right? And part of the history is called High Life. High Life, actually, my mom also loved High Life, but High Life was, one of those early jazz kind of
Right.
movements and connect to Afrobeats. So when you're listening to Fireboy, it's as if you're listening to, part of the old days.
He's kind of old school, kind of taking it old school.
Yeah, he infuses that with modern Afrobeats, and I love that.
And you didn't tell us why Celine Dion?
Celine, Celine's Celine is a special, really, really special one because I've been talking about my mom a lot, but Celine was my mom's favorite artist.
Yeah, yeah.
And we listened to Celine Dion all the time, all the
Mhm.
time. So, yeah, and I still do. When people ask me who's my favorite artist, Celine comes to the top, and they're like, Celine Dion. Like, absolutely Celine Dion. But I love Celine Dion.
And then who's the fourth artist?
Oh, let's see, fourth artist. I've always been I've always been a big Jay-Z fan. Um, and in fact, we know people say that Jay-Z is, the greatest of our generation for when it comes to hip hop music. And I wanted to challenge that. Like, I mean, people say it, but do I really believe that? I don't want to just be on a bandwagon. So I spent the summer and listened to every song, his whole catalog, and kind of did my own research. And I was like, absolutely, this guy is the greatest that we have seen. And you see the progression of even how excellent he got throughout his life. Yeah, so Jay-Z, musically I think is super talented, and also as an entrepreneur and everything that he does. But yeah, Jay-Z is up there for me.
Wow, we're going to share your playlist show. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Hey, how
What's
about 4 books that you recommend to our family and why?
Yeah.
These are your
First,
must reads. These are your must reads.
must reads.
Mhm.
First book, I I mean, I'm a all right. First book that I'll say is read Team of Rivals by
Mhm.
Doris Kearns Goodwin.
I
It
love
should,
Doris Kearns Goodwin. I learned about her when she did the book on the Kennedys. That's how I learned
oh,
about her. Yeah.
yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Any book that she has written, I would recommend reading.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other book that I'll recommend, let's see, there's a book, Titan, about John D. Rockefeller. I thought was really interesting. Um, and
Because
I enjoyed that because as a business, as a company builder, I want to learn from the foundations of how people build their businesses. That was excellent. Um, a book that I also enjoyed is Driven from Within by about Michael Jordan.
yeah.
And for me on that book is just the emphasis on practice. That Michael Jordan is known for his greatness on the court, during game time. But through that book, I actually realized that Michael enjoyed practicing more than he enjoyed
Like
playing.
Kobe. Like
Like
Kobe.
Kobe.
Kobe
Yeah,
was practicing the day after he retired.
that's right. And I was like, that's incredible to know. And he talked about how, practice is, kind of building in a dark and continuing to refine, but it's not just for the game, it's for you.
Mm, mm.
That's important. And then
He'd be a good dinner guest if I gave you 5 people as well.
oh man, yes.
He would be Michael Jordan would be a great dinner guest. I mean, people do kind of follow him for the fantasticness of it, but you're getting
Yeah.
into the fantasticness of who he is.
Yes. And I would give him my seat and sit on the floor. Like, yeah,
Mm,
yeah, is
mm,
to just
mm.
to absorb that. Um, and then the last book will be the Bible. I think that's just foundational. Just gotta have that, and the Bible, not just as a biblical text, but as a source of wisdom. You know,
Mm, mm.
you can open up almost any part and just get incredible just pieces of wisdom and nuggets that can transform your life. So that's foundational.
Beautiful. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Um, so Daniel, what is in your mind? What are the 4 best pieces of advice you can give to our family? And
Mm,
if you're sharing advice that was gifted to you, please
yeah,
give homage to the author.
yes. my first advice would be, and this is from my mom, that everyone has a story. Take time to listen to it. And that has been invaluable in my life, about the curiosity. Yeah, that's been so helpful for me. The other piece of advice is, and this is also a biblical one, but I think it's also foundational in everything, is that that the greatest among us is the one who serve. So being of service, and I think sometimes we perceive that to be great, you have to outwork and all that, which is critically important. But the core of it is serving, and putting others first. So I try to put that into the work that we do at Visible Hands, and other areas of my life. The other piece of advice that was really helpful was from one of my mentors at Goldman. It was a time in my life where I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I went to her and I was like, hey, I want to try something different. What should I do next? What job should I get? And she said this. She said, don't worry about what the next job is, but focus on who you want to become, and everything else will fall into place.
Wow.
That is my framework of making decisions about career. And that's, again, has been so helpful. And it actually helps me to say no to good options, where you can probably get paid more money or to do all these things. Say no to good options and say yes to great options. So that's a really helpful framework.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. This has just been incredible. I've
been an
enjoyed
honor.
the conversation so much with you. What is your mother's name?
Julie.
Julie.
Yeah.
Thank you for Daniel.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Janice. This is such an honor. I mean, first time I heard you speak was at a Black VC event. I think it was the Black VC kickoff. And I was just like, wow, whoever this woman is, I want to get to know her. I want to get to meet her. And it's amazing that we've gotten to connect and share this amazing conversation with the family, but also what you've done, the roads that you've paved. It sets a platform for us to say that it has been done, it could be done, and we're going to do it. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you from my heart to your home. Thank you.
Thank you so much.